Aaron, how am I supposed to live on $15,000 a month? And I did what I just did then. I laughed into the phone until I realized that no, she was not joking. She was literally wondering how she would live on, $15,000 a month, in addition to the 6-figure salary she had herself. So just let me know. Everything is relative, right? Some people live in different worlds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Armando Leduc, producer, film actor, and owner of Leduc Entertainment. I have chosen a life off the beaten path and wanted to find others that are doing the same. Spaghetti on the Wall is a show based on all of the years that I've thrown spaghetti on the wall and nurtured what's stuck. We will share fun stories, ideas, tips, tricks, and more. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you are consuming this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, back with another Spaghetti on the Wall. Aaron Thomas is in the house. What's up, man?
How's it going? Good to see you, Armando.
It's great. It's good to see you. I love the applause. When was the last time you got applauded?
It's been a little while. Oh, yeah.
It's been a minute.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here in the house with my wife and my kids, so not a lot of applause on that front.
Do you remember the last time you got applause?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been on some stages in my life, so yeah. Dancing,
acting,
speaking, playing music, all of the above. Yeah, it's in my blood.
You're a musician.
Yeah. Yep.
What do you play?
Grew up playing classical piano from age like 4. Picked up guitar, picked up trumpet along the way. So guitar, bass, those are my main instruments these days.
Very cool, man. And so you got into law, specifically family law. Give me your journey.
Yeah. So family law, stumbled into it. Family law for those listening is kind of a euphemism for divorce lawyer most of the time. And not a lot of kids say I want to be a divorce lawyer when they grow up. I got recruited into it. I had some experience in the courtroom, and a firm needed that type of experience and recruited me into it. I didn't really know much about it. My parents just celebrated 57 years together, so I didn't have kind of experience, watching divorce growing up. And it's not easy, as you might imagine. Hundreds of divorce litigation cases later, I think that it is best avoided if at all possible.
How do you I'm always wondering how you keep it separate from bringing that stuff home. It's
tough. I mean, it can't not have an impact on you, if you'll excuse the double negative. I mean, you see that kind of negativity day in, day out, and it is going to impact you one way or another. For me, the big thing I noticed, after a couple of years of doing divorce work, my advice to friends and family and anyone who would listen is don't get married. Just avoid the institution altogether. It wasn't that I was against commitment or lifelong relationships or having a family. It was just, people don't know what they're signing up for when they get into the legal relationship that we call marriage. And it is a legal relationship. It's a romantic relationship, of course. It's a family relationship, no doubt, but it is also a legal relationship. And that being overlooked is what causes a lot of drama and a lot of money spent on divorce lawyers every year.
And so your recommendation, and it's a nice segue into prenups, right? Prenups.com. Is that's your website?
That is my website. That is my business. Yeah. So
talk to me about, how that conversation gets played out. 'Cause you're like, I love you so much. Yes, going to spend the rest of your life together. But I need you to sign this prenup real quick. How does that conversation roll?
Yeah. That conversation must go pretty delicately. I think that there's a certain amount of education that needs to happen before you crack open that door of let's go get a prenup. The first thing I would say is, even if you don't think you have a prenup, if you've gotten married, you do have a prenup. Your prenup is just the laws of the state where you happen to live. If a prenup is just kind of the set of rules that says what happens to your finances, what is, who owns what, you, your spouse, or both of you together, then everybody's got a prenup. You either write your own or you accept the default one that has been written by the state you live in. And most people have not read that prenup, and most people would not sign that prenup if they knew what it says, because it's confusing and counterintuitive. So, yeah.
I like that idea. That's a really good way to think about it. It's just like, all right, there already is a prenup in place. You can either plan it or you can have somebody plan it for you.
It's the most important financial contract you'll ever sign in your life. It's the most important financial decision most people will ever make in their life, is getting married. A lot of people say, oh, it's starting a business or it's buying a house, but there are a few things that you can do that put literally every dollar to your name on the line, and marriage is one of those things, and it is worth doing with some forethought. It is worth taking some planning and doing it intentionally and making sure that the rules you're signing up for are ones that you've chosen yourself rather than the ones that have been chosen for you.
Can you tell me some fun, I wouldn't say fun, but memorable stories? I wouldn't say fun, but memorable stories, of some of the cases that you've handled over the years?
Yeah. I've done, probably over 1,000 divorce litigation cases at this point in my life. And I started doing family law in 2007. So I was there during the big economic downturn, of 08, 09, that crash that happened. A lot of people were caught overextended. I specifically remember one case in particular because I'd gone from being a public defender and working with kind of the poorest of the poor to working at a family law firm that catered to the very wealthy. And there was a change in dynamic that happened with that switch in career. And I remember having a client who her husband was making about 25 grand a month. He had been making much more, but he's making about 25 grand a month. And the offer came over that he was going to let her keep the house and let her keep, the car and, most of the assets and pay her child support. And on top of all of that, he was going to give her 15 grand of the 25,000 that he took home every month as alimony. And so, of course, here I am thinking this is the best deal on the earth. I'm about to go, make her day, and called her on the phone and said, hey, this is the deal. He's going to give you the house. He's going to give you the car. You're going to get 15 grand, of alimony a month. And she said, Aaron, how am I supposed to live on 15,000 a month? And I did what I just did then. I laughed into the phone until I realized that no, she was not joking. She was literally wondering how she would live on 15 grand a month, in addition to the 6-figure salary she had herself. So let me know. Everything is relative, right? Some people live in different worlds.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did it end up?
We ended up taking the deal, with some minor tweaks here and there. But it was another one of those kind of realizations that, when a couple gets divorced, it is a financial catastrophe, right? The money that used to support one household goes to supporting two households. And no matter how wealthy you are, that is going to make, an appreciable difference in your life. Where you used to have one of everything, you've got pretty much two of everything. And so, again, to me, it just underscores the need for, kind of education around the topic of what does it mean financially to get married, and, what can you do to make sure that you never end up in a situation where, you're in a divorce court fighting over, what's there.
How do you, because most people are already in relationships, or they're already in marriages, so they can't really do anything about it. So what are your thoughts on, try to making it work?
Yeah, I think the same things that make for a successful marriage make for a successful prenup or a successful contract around your finances. To me, I've identified the 3 principles of transparency, communication, and fairness. If you can incorporate those 3 things into your relationship, if you can incorporate those 3 things into your financial relationship, your prenup, then you're off to a good start. Specifically, Couples who are already married, transparency is that first piece. Nobody wants to be surprised by tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt by their spouse. That tends not to go over well, right? So, I tell people who are already married or people who are just engaged and about to get married to write out a net worth statement for yourself. Put everything that you have down on paper and share it with your fiance or your spouse so that at least you're both working with the same set of facts. You both know everything that's there.
And then once that's done, then what?
And then I think the next step is thinking about how you set up your bank accounts, how you set up the way that money flows in your relationship. So a lot of people do what kind of our parents or grandparents' generation did, and that's have everything come in and out of one bank account. And that may have worked back in the 60s when people got married and they were 21 and they were both starting without 2 nickels to rub together and that type of thing. People today often get married closer to age 30 or even older, and they've typically got 4 or 5 bank accounts, 3 or 4 credit cards, a couple retirement accounts. They've each got a car, probably each got, maybe some equity in a house, maybe a small business. And so, the couple getting married back then was like a startup company from scratch in your garage, and the couple getting married today, it's like a corporate merger. And you would never do something of that magnitude without some real, financial planning, sitting down and having, kind of a partnership agreement, right? To say, what are our rights and responsibilities, what each of us going to do? And so what works best for most couples today is having kind of 3 sets of bank accounts. You've got the ours, you've got mine, and you've got yours. Right. And so making sure that there's enough money in the hours bucket, the hours accounts to pay for what are truly the joint expenses, while making sure that each spouse also has some of their own play money that goes into their separate accounts that they can spend without oversight or, kind of the overlooking eye of their spouse. And so having some kind of, set way to communicate about how are the expenses going to get paid, and do we have kind of equality in our household so you don't have 2 spouses living in the same house but in different socioeconomic brackets, which that does not work. And then,
right.
Yeah, and then kind of building in the ongoing communication throughout your relationship. So, for example, my wife and I have a rule in our prenup that says we sit down once a year. For us, it's a repeating event on our calendar on December 1st, and we talk about, the finances, the state of the finances of our household. Are we happy with the way that our spending is going? Kind of look back at the past year. What were the big expenses? Were there any big surprises? Was there something that we didn't budget enough for that we want to use that information to incorporate into next year's budget? And making sure that we've disclosed all of, the relevant information with each other, our incomes, any kind of debts, that are in each other's names, and then using that information to plan the upcoming year. Budgeting, how much do we want to put towards our travel fund versus the baby fund versus the house fund? Is this year we get a new car or take a big trip or change houses? And having a set time to discuss the big financial decisions takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, because what a lot of couples do otherwise is they just kind of put their head in the sand. Nobody brings it up. It's uncomfortable to have the money conversations. And then it only comes up when it's in the context of an argument or something has gone horribly wrong already.
But yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, man. It's hard to have tough conversations, especially when, there is this sort of preconceived notion as to what marriage is like. You know what I mean? Or what you think it's like. And that's the thing too, is right. Like I would have I have my thoughts on what marriage is like. My wife has her thoughts on what marriage is like, and bridging that gap is just so difficult, especially when it comes to like, money talks and like important things like that, which, they should be happening, Is that a service that you provide? No. Like the talk,
We don't provide the talk, but I think what we do provide is the framework that makes it easier for couples to have these conversations. So, for example, for that first step that I'm talking about having transparency about your finances, for any prenup to be enforceable in any of the 50 states, each spouse has to disclose all of their assets and debts to one another. So in a way, you are forcing that conversation on the front end to make sure it happens. And then we propose that couples put rules in their prenups about having a set time every year to sit down and disclose the finances and coming up with an agenda for your, for lack of a better way to put it, your shareholders meeting of your household, right? Where you sit down and you share this information. Or my wife and I have something in our prenup. We have counseling provisions, right? So one thing I noticed when I was doing divorce work is when one spouse wants to go do counseling, the other one's not interested, doesn't think they need it. And then that spouse comes around and the first spouse has already given up on the idea. And we decided at the beginning of our relationship that we were going to agree that if one of us wanted to go to counseling, we were going to counseling. And we literally wrote it into our agreement that either one of us once a year could trigger this provision, and we would be required to go to a minimum of 3 counseling sessions. And if we ever got to the point where one of us wanted to actually file for divorce, we'd have to do 6 counseling sessions before either one of us would be allowed to even file for divorce. And so by putting these kind of like roadblocks in or guidelines in about how our relationship was going to be run, I think we created the framework so that we can have these conversations. And when couples know, all right, if I want to go to counseling, we are going to counseling. It's already agreed to. It's in writing. We put our signatures on it. I find they're much more likely to actually follow through and do it so that, no, am I always going to be there to help them have the money talk at the end of the year? No. But they have a set of rules. They have a framework where if they kind of follow the system, these conversations will happen more often than not.
Do you have counselors that you recommend?
Absolutely. Yeah, all the time. Because they are so needed. And a lot of times people, the first time that they've actually had the conversation about what their views are on doing counseling is when they are talking through this process and hearing what their options are for their prenuptial agreement. And one person says, I'm not really into counseling. The other one says, actually, no, I would like counseling. I think that is a good idea, and it's something that we should incorporate into our relationship. And so it's a good time to set those things up so that if you've already got a counselor, their name and their number in your phone, then it's a lot easier to make that call than if where it feels like it's punitive, or one spouse comes and says, hey, we need to go to counseling, and the other one says, hey, what's wrong? What do you mean we need to go to counseling? Or are we in that dire straits? Is it that bad? Are you not happy in the relationship? Instead, it's from a framework of, hey, we agreed that, we're just going to do a check-in. The same way you go to a doctor and get your annual physical, we're just going to go and get a check-in. It doesn't mean that the relationship is at a 2 out of 10 and it's at the very end. You could be at a 7 out of 10 in your relationship and you just want to get back up to a 9, right? Because you like that feeling of the relationship being at a 9 or 10. And I think when you set up the framework ahead of time, it's a lot easier to get to the point where, let's have the conversation before it gets bad. Let's go do counseling before it gets bad. Rather than, just kind of playing it by ear.
How long does a prenup usually take?
Process usually takes no more than a month. One of the things that I hear from my clients is, I thought this was going to be so much harder. I thought this was going to be so much tougher to get through. But yeah, typically it happens over the course of a few meetings. People come in, they find out what their options are. Meeting 2, they come back. They say, hey, we'd like some of this. We'd like that counseling provision. We want to put this in, that in. And then, usually there's a final meeting where we walk through together and make sure they understand everything. Some of the longest parts is really just the couple having the conversations that they need to have and making sure they're aligned and on the same page in between some of those meetings.
Have you guys done any post-nups? I've been hearing about this.
We do post-nups a lot. These days, there's a lot of couples that come to us. Some are people who they wanted to get a prenup and they got caught up in the wedding planning and they missed the date, and so they're circling back, a few months after their wedding date to get the post-nup. Others are couples who they kind of figure out what the marital contract says, but they've already been married for 5, 10, 15 years, and they're thinking, wait a minute, I am saving my money over here and investing and maxing out my 401k, and my spouse has chosen to not save, and I don't want to be hurt by their decisions, and they kind of agree that we've lived these separate lives. Can we just agree that what's in my name belongs to me, what's in your name belongs to you, and whatever we put in joint names is joint, rather than having kind of unintended consequences where somebody's in a divorce lawyer's office, they're like, what do you mean I have to give him half of my retirement? Like, he spent every penny he made throughout the marriage, and we kept our finances separate. And those couples realizing that the court doesn't care what their system was. If it's not written down, everything is considered one pile of money, and is about to get chopped up in cases where that's not what the couple actually intended.
So how hard are postnups than prenups?
Hard in the sense of the couple getting on the same page. I mean, it really depends on the circumstances of the individual couple. There are some people who they're getting a postnup because one spouse cheated, and they're like, okay, if we're going to make this relationship work, I want to make sure that I'm taken care of, and that if you cheat, that there's going to be a financial penalty the second time around, right? You get 10% or 20% less of the assets if you cheat again. So wow. If it's a situation like that, yes, it can be a little tricky. It can be a little touchy, right? But most of the postnups that I do are actually couples who they kind of live with their finances relatively separate anyway, and they just want to go ahead and put that in place so that if something were to go wrong down the line, that there's no question that, if I've got a business, I get to keep my business. If you've got, a bunch in retirement, you get to keep your retirement. Or, sometimes people come in with a house, another piece of property, and they realize that, okay, this would actually be viewed by a court as a commingled asset, and we want to separate that out. Or maybe we just want to protect each other from each other's debts as well. And so sometimes couples will do a postnup for those reasons.
Talk to me about the business of the law, just being a lawyer and owning this law firm. How does somebody sell their law firm business? If they wanted it, they're like, yeah, I'm ready to retire.
Yeah. So it's tough. I mean, it's a great question because so many lawyers build a law practice around themselves, and it's all around their personality and their expertise, and then they don't have anything that can be sold at the end of the day. And so I think, what lawyers who have more of an entrepreneurial mindset and want to be able to build something that could potentially be sold down the line, you've got to think really in terms of setting up systems, putting systems and processes in place so that as much as what is done in your business can be done by somebody else, right? I think a lot of us, have a little bit of ego involved and think, nobody can pull off the magic that I can pull off, but probably a lot of the magic that you do could be put down in writing and replicated by another person. And if you ever want to be able to sell your business when it's time to retire, it better be in a process that's written down that somebody else can accomplish. There are things that you can do that create a good experience for your clients, for your customers, right? There are things that you can do to make sure that you have checked all the boxes of potential things that your clients need to be thinking about when you're serving them. And so getting as many things out of your head and down into a system that other people can help you with is good for a sustainable business, as well as setting yourself up to be able to sell the practice later on down the line.
Is that what you're thinking about doing? Is that, your plan once you're done? You want to sell the business?
I love doing this. I hope that I have a long time doing this work. I spent over 15 years being a divorce lawyer, and I hope that I have at least another 15 years of what I believe is helping keep marriages together by helping couples get aligned on their finances and taking some of the most common arguments the couples have, hint, hint, money, and giving them a way to resolve those issues before they devolve into potentially marriage-ending arguments.
Heard that, man. Well, Aaron, I appreciate you being on. Let the people know where they can find you. I know you're in Atlanta, so if you guys need family law advice and counsel, hit them up. Where can they find you?
So definitely they can come see me at the website, prenups.com. I'm also Prenup Guy on all your favorite social media platforms.
Awesome. Fantastic. I learned a lot today. I really do appreciate you being on.
This has been great. Appreciate it. It's been an honor being on your show, Armando, and hello to all the listeners.
Fantastic. And that was Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen, by LeDuc Entertainment for all of your social media marketing needs and podcasting and all of that good stuff. We got you, and you can watch Spaghetti on the Wall anywhere where you can listen to a podcast. Spotify, Apple Music. You're probably listening to it right now. And we'll see y'all next week.